Hello and welcome to the IRN-CRU podcast, a podcast made in Scotland by NFL lovers. I'm your replacement host for this evening, Ross Stud-Stirling, and joining me tonight I have two of our finest crew members, one from the AFC and one from the NFC. So starting off with the NFC, I've got our very own Detroit Lions fan, Andy. How are we doing, Andy?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's been a while since I've been on, so I'm just glad to be back on the pod and to chat over a couple of good games, a couple of interesting games, one closer than the other. But nope, just glad to be here with yourselves.
Good stuff, Andy. Good stuff. I appreciate you joining us, my man. Just before I introduce our AFC guest, I will apologise. Instagram has absolutely crapped itself on me, so we're not live on Instagram. It is just YouTube and X tonight. But joining us from the AFC side, we have our very own Kilty Texan, the man in his bullpen. We have Graham. How are we doing, man?
Yeah, doing fine. Ready to dissect this games from the weekend. Let's get into it.
I know, let's not beat about the bush any further. We might as well crack on. So we had our championship weekend happening. We now know who is in the Super Bowl, and judging from my smile, most folk, if they are watching, will already know that my team is in the Super Bowl. So we have the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. A repeat from a couple of years ago, the one that nobody wanted. Everyone was rooting for Commanders Bills, I think, over the weekend, but instead they got the Eagles and the Chiefs. So we'll start off on the NFC side. That was our first game on Sunday, kicking off at a fairly respectable time of 8:30 in the UK, actually, which wasn't too bad. We had the Commanders travelling into the Link to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Could the Commanders come in, cause the upset like they did? Sorry to mention this, Andy, like they did in Detroit, but it just seemed like it was a step too far from them. It ended up being a massive 55 points to 23 for the Eagles. 7 rushing touchdowns for the Eagles, which just even to say seems phenomenal. The Commanders just turnovers killed them in this one for me as well. But Jaden Daniels was, as he has been all season, Jaden Daniels was excellent. I think he was let down by a couple of his receivers in the turnover battle. Commanders getting off to a nice start, 18-play drive. They got points on the board, and then all of a sudden, Saquon Barkley steps on the field, and I think his first or second touch, he houses it for 60 yards. Andy, I'm going to come to you first on this one, being our NFC expert for this evening. What were your takeaways for this game?
I mean, the final scoreline, 55-23, I think the Eagles kind of showed their not championship mentality, but just the levels of difference in them. Commanders up and coming, maybe nobody kind of expecting them to be quite there. And it looked like as the game went on, they were finding their rhythm. And like you said about the turnovers with the Commanders, I don't think the Commanders had to play a perfect game in this one in order to get through, but they couldn't do what the turnovers that they did in such crucial times within the game. And yeah, I was a bit disappointed, in all honesty, especially as you say, as a Lions fan, we were put out by the Commanders. You're kind of hoping maybe they go on and win it, and it's a bit more respectable for yourself as a fan, of the Lions. But the matchup, I just don't think suited them well. I think they split the series, didn't they, in the regular season? But
it was one apiece in the regular season.
Yeah, I really like the Eagles' defense. I have to say, they've got players. I think Nolan Smith's kind of come onto a game. They always seem to find these guys that just fight, that hit for them at the right time. And so, yeah, credit to them. I mean, as you mentioned again as well, Barkley just takes games over. I think he's the difference, isn't he? I mean, I know it's an obvious thing to say, but he's such a difference maker. And with Hurts sort of looking a bit injured, that they needed it, I think, in this run that they've been on. And like I say, credit to them, I guess.
Yeah, no, that was it. I mean, before the game, we all seen Jalen Hurts kind of moving around. He had that big, thick brace on his knee for the week before. Didn't really seem to impact him. I don't know whether it was just the Commanders couldn't get any pressure on him. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts, he ran in 3 touchdowns himself as well, albeit a couple of them off the back of some tush pushes. One of them was absolutely hilarious for all the wrong reasons for the Commanders. But Barkley, as you said, Andy, I actually thought he had more yardage than this, but he only had like 118 yards on 15 carries. And when you consider that one of those runs was like a 60-yard touchdown run himself, it even goes to show that Barkley's probably got another level to kind of go. If he needed to, he could have probably hit the gas a bit more. Graham, coming to yourself, so what did you make of the Commanders? Was it just the Eagles' defense just absolutely out-bullied and out-muscled them? Was it a step too far for this young team? Where do you think it kind of disintegrated for them?
Yeah, I think it was maybe just that step too far for them this weekend. Like Andy said, that Eagles defense is legit. I think they've been the best defense in the league this season for quite some time. And the way the Commanders play, they're quite aggressive, aren't they, on offense? You know, they very rarely punt. They're always going for it, and maybe that led to a bit of a downfall. Sometimes it's a positional game, but when you see Barkley can snap one off of one play and pretty much take it to the house, it's hard to play that positional game as well. So I think obviously turnovers hurt you, and it's what the other team does with that turnovers. If memory serves me right, did the Eagles put all three back?
Yeah,
for 7.
They scored all three. They scored touchdowns in all three of them.
Yeah, so that's a 21-point swing right there, pretty much. And games like this, you can't do it. If you look at the final score, you take off that 3 turnovers, and you're really looking at, it's a 2-score game at that point. So it's a lot closer. But turnovers will kill you in these games.
No, absolutely. When you're getting into the playoffs as a whole, and we've spoke about it on, I think, all the review casts, we've spoke about the kind of turnover battle, and the teams that are winning the turnover battle for the most part are the ones that are progressing on to the next stage. As I say, I think there's only been one game so far in the playoffs that hasn't had a turnover in it, and that was the Chiefs-Texans game. Both teams played a clean game on that one. Every other game has had 3-4 turnovers, which has absolutely killed the losing side in the end up. It didn't really get out of hand. I think what the Commanders, to their credit, had kept it close for the most part. It's up to the second quarter. I think we're still sitting at 14-12 when they committed one of these turnovers. I think, Andy, you'd kind of mentioned they looked like they were kind of building into a wee bit of a rhythm, and I think if the Commanders had held that ball a little bit longer pre-half-time, could have been interesting to see what the Eagles done. But I think it would be absolutely remiss not to talk about that defence. Is again, Andy, as you've mentioned, and Graham, obviously you've mentioned as well, they're the number one defence in the league on the season. They're there on merit, undoubtedly. Such a young secondary, which just seems to be absolutely gelling together. One of the unsung heroes from me watching the game is probably Zach Bond, the linebacker. Every time there seemed to be a big play, he was in and around it. Andy, what do you how vital do you think is it going to be? Do you think it's going to be for the Eagles' defense to kind of keep going? Do you think that because it is a young defense, obviously I was looking at comparisons between the Super Bowls, the previous one, and all the defensive guys that we were talking about for the Eagles at that time were all 30 or above. Darius Slay's the oldest one in there at 34 this time. The rest of these guys are 23, 24, 25. Do you think the Super Bowl's going to catch them out and maybe get struck with the occasion, or do you think these guys are just going to keep going as they have all season?
I don't think it'll be the occasion that gets them. It'll be the fact that they're playing the Chiefs and Mahomes. If that's what will get them, it's the fact that they're coming up against a team that, is going for the three-peat that's talked about so much. But you have to give credit to, and I think the biggest part of the Eagles is the general manager, is Howie Roseman. He's so aggressive in his trades, and you look at, they had the same as I look at the Lions. They've identified a weakness, which was the cornerbacks, the Eagles and the Lions. Eagles go and draft Quinion Mitchell with the first pick. They then come back in the second round and get Cooper DeJean. They've both played a massive role in turning around that secondary. And like you said as well, with an Asian defense at the time, they've kind of retooled. They've not had to go into a full rebuilding sort of mode on that side of the ball. They've just added a couple of young pieces. I think Zach Bond came in a very low contract, sort of like a 1 year. I don't know the details of the contract, but I'm sure it's something like 1-2 million, something ridiculous. So I'm sure he's due a payday. But they've been aggressive when they needed to, in their free agent signings, and even if you look at sort of the Hassan Reddick sort of kind of forgotten about now. We're not talking about that. That Jalen Carter stepped up. You see Jordan Davis making plays. They've got players in all sort of in the front seven and on the back end. So I just don't know. I think the Chiefs will it's just such a tough out for anyone, isn't it? Going up against Mahomes, because it's the scrambling ability you've really got to be sort of keeping an eye on, because Mahomes is just so good at picking up 10 yards when he scrambles. And so, but it's going to be a good matchup. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Don't obviously want to step on the toes of whoever's doing the preview next week on that one. But again, the lines for the Eagles have been one of their biggest strengths this season. Graham, I'm going to kind of come to you. This one, we obviously seen the best of the Eagles lines. Did you happen to catch the tush push play with Frankie Louvu getting flagged a couple of times, and then someone else got flagged? The ball was basically in the end zone. The ref had to warn them about unsportsmanlike conduct and then tell them that he can award the touchdown, which was a rule. I don't know anybody that knew that rule, to be honest. What did you make of that kind of debacle, if you like?
You can call it a debacle, and it's difficult because Troy Polamalu made quite a career at being able to judge that jump, and Louvu had a pretty consistent game up until that point. He'd been pretty effective in busting through the line. He was pretty much perfect on the timing of the snap 2 or 3 times before that, and he was just hyped. He was trying to find a way to leverage that tush push out of the equation. But yeah. For the neutral fan watching it, you're looking for guys to be making those plays, and it didn't quite work out. And yes, it can be frustrating, but I don't think they were intentionally trying to disrupt the game. Yeah. They're just trying to disrupt the play. So I understand why the ref will have to step in. I think the announcer actually called it just before the ref come on the mic and said that he can award the touchdown. Yeah. I don't know if he was wired to the booth on that one and got reminded of it. But yeah, I have no problem with guys trying to make plays like that. It's just, you obviously can't keep moving the ball up, because what are you moving at, like a couple mil at a time? Like the Eagles need any more help on short yardage situations, because they seem to have the most secure short gain in the league. So no. I'm here for it, I thought it was quite comedic in some ways, I think they were even having a laugh about it, but
yeah. That was it. You seen Frankie Louvu stick his tongue out at the second time it went over, and it was just watching it. It was absolutely hilarious. Like the first time, it was like something out of the WWE, clotheslined Jalen Hurts, and it was hanging on to him so he didn't fall, and then the next one, Hurts seen it coming, just steps back, and Louvu just dives into that gap between him and I don't know if it was Dickerson or Jurgens at that point. But that'll definitely be something to monitor for the Eagles side. We know how good they are at short yardage, but again, centre issues, injuries. Jurgens obviously sat out the game. Dickerson stepped in. Dickerson then gets banged up. Jurgens is back in. So that's definitely going to be something to monitor if you're an Eagles fan. Which would have been good if Kev was able to make it on, because I'm sure he would be delighted and slightly worried about that at the same time. So just before we kind of move on then, guys, what I'm going to do, just going to come to you. So going to have a look at just the Commanders side of things and just say, so from their side, obviously, no one's seen them get into the championship game. Probably, Graham, from your perspective, you could probably see similarities between the Commanders season this season and what the Texans done last year, where these both kind of come out of nowhere to get into the playoffs. What if you're Dan Quinn? Obviously, you're massively proud of the season that your guys have displayed for you. Where are you going next? What do you guys need to do to kind of make that next step if you're the Commanders?
Well, they've got to be. I know it'll hurt, but they have to be so proud of their efforts this year. They have to be. If you'd given any of those players the opportunity to be one win away from being in the Super Bowl, I bet they would have snapped your hand off. They've been fantastic. They seem to have got like an eclectic mix of players that seem to just be able to churn out results. Unfortunate for them the way it went down. I think they'll get back in the lab. They'll look at what they've got, and they'll build on. I think. Well, Jaden Daniels already seems to be established, but as you likened it to the Texans, we have to see how he jumps to year 2, and when defenses are more attuned to what he's capable of, and everyone's got that bit more tape. I think CJ struggled with that a bit this year. Not to take it back to my Texans, but you see the similarities there completely with that. One thing I'll mention is I felt really sorry for Zach Ertz at the end of that game. You know, he pretty much took the team on his back at one point. He seemed to be the most reliable guy on the team for his hands and everything after the 3 fumbles and stuff. And yeah, that must have hurt seeing his old team brushing past him to do that. But I think the Commanders fan base must be like, they must be so proud of their team. Like I'd have been ecstatic to have made it to that game, thinking you've got no chance. So yeah, no, they don't have a lot to worry about. They'll be a dangerous unit again next year.
No, definitely. So I totally agree with you. Zach Ertz was massive for them. I mean, he had like 101 yards in the end up, and when you consider how long Zach Ertz has been in the league, massive performance from him. And again, biggest stage obviously for the Commanders. He's the one that stepped up, and McLaurin obviously got a massive touchdown for them as well. And it's guys like that you do feel sorry for. Obviously, what McLaurin in particular has kind of been through with all the changes since he's been drafted in the Commanders, the quarterbacks that he's hit on. And then it seems like he's finally got his guy, and there seems to be that real bond between those two guys. So they will definitely be an exciting watch next year. Andy, obviously this is a team that you'll see more of potentially in the NFC side of things. Do you think they can get back into the playoffs next year? And what do you think they need to do to get there to cause your Lions, who seem to be probably one of the favourites already, I'd imagine already, to kind of get back into those playoffs and cause an issue? What do you think the Commanders need to do to join you guys at the top of the NFC?
I think more of the same. I think the good thing is, like you have said about Jaden Daniels, is he looks like he's proven himself as a QB. He's got to obviously make that jump to year 2. It could be quite difficult, but I think the most important thing for him is that he seems like a leader that the players really are attached to, and they will follow. So wherever he goes, they'll go with him. And I think Washington's turned itself into one of the more popular free agent sort of destinations now. With Jaden Daniels, he seems like he has a really good personality. Dan Quinn, I think, has looked really good this year. He's come across well, I think, this year as a leader as well. And I think the culture since the new ownership's come in has really improved. So I think Washington's done an incredible job of turning it around. I think this year they kind of went for some veteran free agents on shorter deals just to get that culture established. You're looking at sort of Bobby Wagner. We've talked about Frankie Louvu. He's been a brilliant pickup for them. And even on the offensive side of the ball, we've talked about Ertz. He's been in the league for quite some time. These are guys that maybe not the most outspoken, but veterans of the game, true leaders, and they've really brought on the younger talent in that team as well. So I think we'll see a couple maybe bigger free agents head that way. So you've just got to keep doing that, draft well, and more of the same. Really, I don't think they have to change too much or do too much.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as well. Obviously, they made the massive trade for Lattimore now during the season, getting him in there. I suppose kind of almost full time if you like, getting that kind of the pre-season side of things out the way and being around, as you mentioned, that culture change has been massive for the Commanders over the last kind of 2 years since the new ownership and that's come in as well. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how they do going forward. So we will move on then to the AFC side of things. Probably will be a bit of a shorter pod tonight with us only having 2 games to talk about. But I know from my perspective I could probably talk about this one for the next 40 minutes anyway. But we had the Bills coming into Arrowhead. I mentioned it last week as well. The return of the Arrowhead Invitational. The Bills, Josh Allen come in. He was 0-3 against Mahomes in the playoffs. Couldn't quite get that win. So he's now 0-4 against Mahomes, 32-29 to the Chiefs. Not quite as high scoring as the Commanders Eagles game, but it was every bit as exciting. From my perspective, obviously I was delighted with the end result. Mahomes come out. I found it very interesting, our starting game plan, if you like. I thought we were going to maybe try and just run over the top of the Bills because everyone had been talking about how the Bills couldn't stop the run all season. So I was expecting to see lots of Kareem Hunt, lots of Isaiah Pacheco. But the first drive from Mahomes, it was literally quick throws, balls out his hand within 2 settings. Must have threw the game plan for Buffalo right out the window because that line could not get near Mahomes, certainly in the earlier parts of the game. Graham, as I said, I could obviously talk about the Chiefs all night on that side of it. What did you take away from this game? What did you see that maybe I didn't see with my red-tinted glasses on?
No, I think you're spot on. Obviously, there's a lot of the chatter, as usual, comes out when the Chiefs get a win. Some of it you can listen to, some of it you should pan off. But there was a big point in the game again, like the week before with my team. The Bills did a lot to beat themselves in this game. There might have been the odd controversial kind of talking point, very small, but yeah, the Bills. Oh man, see when they were down on that in the red zone, short 1 yard to go. It's like the Chiefs know what you're away to do. They've stopped it, so why go back to it right away? It's like it's not working. Find something else. You know, it was just so predictable by the Bills in certain short down situations. It was frustrating watching it as a neutral because you're like, it's not working. Change it up. It might have worked with everyone else in the league, but it's not working tonight. So they couldn't adjust. Yeah. So the Bills did a lot to beat themselves. Josh Allen looked like an absolute broken man at the end of the game. It's like Mahomes and the Chiefs have snatched his soul out. Does he come back from it? No idea. That's got to start affecting you at some point.
Yeah, it's got to be that kind of mental blocker in your head at some point to say, right, we're coming up against the Chiefs. We can't beat them almost, and you're beat before you even step on the field. I think what you said there, Graham, about the kind of, or touching on the kind of coaching aspects, the adjustments, those kind of things, it became very clear very early that Spags had identified Josh Allen's tendencies, and that had been filtered into the defences. Even the commentary called it out as well. They know Allen goes to the left on the quarterback sneaks, so they're loading up on that side. Stopped it multiple times. There's an obvious one where, even from my perspective, I think he did get it on that one. Obviously, the line judges couldn't quite agree on where the position, but again, I give the referees a bit of leeway because one of them's got Chris Jones plus another massive unit of defensive linemen in front of him, so there's no way he can see the ball. The other line judge, again, similar scenario, he's got those linemen in his way. He's going to find it very difficult as well. So I kind of took away from that one where, regardless of what the call was, it was never getting overturned type thing because there there was no evidence to kind of do it. Unfortunately, if you're a Bills fan. But Andy, what about yourself? What were your kind of takeaways for this game then?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good game. I know we talked about sort of controversial moments in that game, and that's always going to happen, I suppose. I was really disappointed in that final drive from the Bills. That was the moment to go and do it, and they just to tie the game, maybe get it to overtime, and so I was really disappointed with sort of the ending for the Bills. But I think you talked about the game plan for the Chiefs as well. The Mahomes RPO was just the run pass option. They could not defend it. It's a thing of beauty. They could not get near. It was just working every time. And then they kind of shifted, and then you started seeing Mahomes do the play action rollout, and that was working as well. And the Chiefs they're so good at it and Mahomes is so good at selling it that if it's not broken, just keep doing it. And he's so impressive in that, just getting the first downs no matter whatever it takes. And the credit goes to Andy Reid as well, obviously the coach, for the sort of connection they have in that offense. I mean, I keep forgetting that they're doing it without sort of Rashee Rice, who I love as a receiver. I think he's brilliant. Another team that's quite aggressive when it comes to sort of trades and getting players in. Because for me, the Chiefs with Mahomes, it's win now every season they go into.
Yeah.
And you look at the sort of picking up, they'll take a chance on a Hopkins. Okay, it might not have worked out, but I like to see a team at least try and push on. He's contributing in some games, but yeah, just impressed again by the Chiefs. And for the Bills, like you said about that mental block, it's got to be tough. It's the AFC as a whole. Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow. You don't have that in the NFC. It's just a brutal conference to be in if you're not one of those sort of four teams. Obviously, we talk about the Bills, but Mahomes, yeah, he's still QB1, isn't he?
Yeah, he seems to kind of be doing it. You mentioned, obviously, when we were talking about the Eagles, about scrambling. It's almost as if he saves that for the off-season. You don't see it a lot during the regular season, and then it hits the off-season, and you see those scrambles. And again, we've seen it multiple times on fourth down, where it was just that wee rollout. He had the wide receiver or running back at the side of him. He could lateral if he wanted to, but he never ever had to because the Bills just weren't reading that aspect of it as well. We spoke obviously about turnover battles and turnovers winning games. This was one of the few occasions where the Bills actually won the turnover battle. They picked up one fumble that Mahomes actually lost. But what I found kind of fascinating watching it was the Bills actually had 4 fumbles themselves. They managed to recover them, being the only difference.
Yeah.
But they were so costly because they were putting them back into those extra yardage where if you're giving somebody like Spags that time to go, right, I can scheme something up to maybe throw you off, and it just seemed to help the Chiefs and give them that wee energy lift as well. Again, from my perspective, special teams is something that I've mentioned a couple of times on the pod that I think this season the Chiefs have really stepped up on. And Nick Remigio, he stepped up massively for the Chiefs as well in this game. He had a massive punt return where I thought, I seen the Bills guy coming in and I thought, why have you no fair catch this? And it just suddenly the Bills defenders flew by him and he's 40, 50 yards down the field. So it just seemed like one of those days for the Chiefs where everything seemed to be hitting on every single aspect. Do you think there was a hold in that one?
One.
I think every punt return was holding, to be honest. But take that aspect aside, one of the things, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this, because you guys weren't on when I kind of said it. We spoke about Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen, I was worried for him in the first couple of plays because he just seemed to loft a couple up there, which we really should have been picking off in his first drive. Seemed to settle down after he had that kind of fumbled snap and really done everything he could for the Bills. Obviously, we've mentioned in this game the coaching adjustments were so vital in this game. The Chiefs were making those adjustments. It was becoming successful for them. The Bills didn't seem to adjust, which then comes back to your coaching aspect. do we think Sean McDermott is on a bit of a hot seat because he seems to keep getting into this latter stages of the playoffs, but can't seem to get over that hump? Andy, I'll come to you first. Do we think Sean McDermott's at risk, I suppose?
I think he is at risk. I wouldn't personally be wanting to get rid of him. I mean, heading into the season, this was meant to be a bit of a down year for a Bills aspect. You know, with the expectations they've had for the past few years. Obviously, no Stephon Diggs, and they've kind of exceeded expectations in a lot of way. That the momentum that they gained throughout the season, okay, expectations started to rise again, and it was all of a sudden, no, yeah, this is now a Super Bowl sort of team. And a lot of that is down to sort of Josh Allen. We know that, the quality he has, but a lot of that has to go to the coaching as well. I thought they were really impressive throughout this campaign, and I just don't know. I don't know if it's such a risk, isn't it? I don't know. For me, I wouldn't be personally be getting rid of him. I understand the frustrations coming, and maybe Bills fans out there want one of these sort of offensive geniuses there to sort of maybe push Allen to the next stage to get over the hump. But it's a massive risk if you do sort of move on from McDermott, because they've established quite a winning culture, really, haven't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've lost count of how many times they've won the NFC East at this stage, so they don't really seem to be under any pressure there. As you say, Andy, they've got that winning culture. This year was meant to be a rebuilding year for them, so it was like a free hit. And I know we were supposed to record last night. It was on with Phil, who's a Bills fan, who unfortunately couldn't join us tonight. He was saying that he was on at the start of the season, he predicted like 9-8 for the Bills, and then all of a sudden when they get rolling, he's like, wait a minute, we could actually do something here. And it's the old Scottish saying of it's the hope that kills you, I suppose. But the coaching element was certainly a big, massive frustration for him when we were having a wee chat last night. Graham, do you share Andy's thoughts in the sense of you don't think they should be getting rid of McDermott, or do you have a different viewpoint? What do you think?
No, I kind of echo what Andy's saying. When you look at them at the start of the season, they weren't overly impressive coming out of the gate. They found a system that worked for them. They began picking up wins. They started building that momentum through the year. And yeah, it's fine. You've got the winning culture. And like Andy said, who do you go and replace him with? You know, who out there are you looking at just now as a candidate and says he's better than the guy we've got that keeps getting us, to the playoffs? Who's going to take this team to the next level? If there's nobody out there just now, just sit where you are. It was meant to be a down year. You still got as far as you have. I don't think you can really complain too much. When there's teams out there who are in far worse situations who aren't going to move on. Plus, look at some of the teams that have been successful over many years. You've got teams like your Steelers and your Ravens and all that. They've kept their coaching staff for 17 odd years and that. Yeah. Their head coaches. They're not winning a Super Bowl every year. So you have to look at if you can get a sustainable winning culture, that sometimes leads on to bigger success, and sometimes it just takes a while. But as long as you've got the winning culture and everyone still buys into that culture, you're going to be okay. So I think they're better maybe just sticking with him. But yeah, you're right. The coaching, I think, did let them down a little bit. And that last drive by Allen, when I seen it happening, I was like, this is like the most toothless I've seen the Bills all year. They just seem to be devoid of answers at that point. And I don't expect too much.
They seem to kind of run out of ideas with this. I think Spags, obviously, so watching the Chiefs every week, you kind of know that at some stage you're getting that safety blitz, you're getting McDuffie, or you're getting Reed bombing from that outside. It's happening at least once a game. They hadn't done it, and then on that last third and whatever it was, or fourth and whatever it was to Kincaid, you just seen McDuffie bombing around that outside to try and get to Allen and just disrupt that momentum. So Spags had obviously saved it up at that stage as well for them. There was something I had in my head that I was going to say there. Let's go. There it is. Again, seeing this game every single season, it feels like there's always one player comes out of Buffalo. No, I suppose not in nowhere as such this year, but the 13-second game we had Gabe Davis had an absolute monster game, the game of his life against us. This year it seemed to be Matt Collins. Turns up in his Muppets outfit. I think it was Animal he walked into Arrowhead Stadium with.
Yeah.
So it was, which is class. We've spoke again about it already on the pod about these outfits. He's come in as construction workers, and he obviously comes in with his no shoes and stuff like that. Matt Collins had himself a massive game. Only had 3 receptions, 73 yards and a touchdown, but it seemed to be big plays when Josh Allen really needed him. He seemed to be that kind of go-to guy for them. It'd be interesting to see if they kind of stick with him. Again, something I'm kind of curious to get your guys' take on. I'd mentioned at the start the Chiefs seemed to really disrupt the Bills' game plan almost with the Mahomes RPO side of things. The Bills seem to kind of get it rolling a little bit with James Cook and getting the rushing game going, which is what they've built their season on for the most part. They've built it off the back of that rushing game. Then all of a sudden they got themselves ahead and it seemed to kind of disappear again. They wanted to go back to throwing. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Why do you think they kind of come away from the rushing game almost and started kind of trying to focus in on the pass? Graham, come to you first on that one.
I generally don't have a clue why they did that. Cook was rolling. It plays into your hand if you can keep the running game going. You can knock more time off the clock in a hostile environment. If you're running plays and you're keeping the chains moving, you're keeping Pat Mahomes, the most dangerous player on the field, on the sidelines. I just don't know why you would move away. Has nobody learned anything from Atlanta Falcons crumbling against the New England Patriots years ago? Yeah. Run the ball. Look at what the Eagles did. The Eagles run the ball. Saquon Barkley's come out and slated the media by saying that they don't think you can win Super Bowls by running the ball anymore, and he's there to prove them wrong. If it's a system that works, go. I don't understand why he wasn't getting the ball on these short yardage situations, because he seemed to be the one who was finding the gaps and stuff. I don't know. I just don't understand it. It's infuriating as a fan when it's your team, when you know you should be running it and you're not running it. So I can only imagine how the Bills fans were feeling watching that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's again, I think it was you that said it. It's about Josh Allen. It looked like his soul had been ripped out. That's how you rip the soul out of teams, is you run that ball down their throat. As you mentioned, Arrowhead must be a horrible environment if you're an away fan. But if you're running that ball, the frustration's then going to come in for the fans. You really are almost stealing the fans' soul, which will then impact the players as well. Andy, what about you? What do you think? Why do you think the Bills suddenly come away from the run?
I think teams get too cute and they think that they have to change it up and keep them guessing. But if something's working, you just keep at it until they prove you otherwise. As a fan of a team that has 2 good running backs, I love to just see 5-yard pickup, 6-yard pickup. Just keep doing it. There's no need to change. And James Cook, I think, has really stepped up his game this year. He's been a big factor in why the Bills have actually got to where they've got. And you've just got to trust. I know you've got Allen, you've got the franchise QB, but if Cook can do it for you, they just keep doing that. He's an impressive runner, and like I said, I think it's just coaches get a bit too cute. Do they think that they have to, like we said about that mental block? It's not only the QB that's thinking about this. It's the coaching staff thinking, right, we need to now flip what we're doing and keep them guessing. But when you're going up against an experienced defensive coordinator and an experienced defense, I don't see the point in fixing something that's not broken. And it's a shame because Cook could have had a humongous game really against that defense.
No, definitely. It seemed to be kind of rip off big plays, and I was delighted to see him kind of kept under 100 yards. I'd mentioned it on the kind of preview, the fact that we had kept him relatively quiet the last time when we played them in Buffalo. He'd scored the 3 touchdowns, but he was down at 20, 30 yards when we met in the regular season, so we had kept him quiet. But it was those short-yarded situations in the red zone, like we've already spoke about, where Buffalo wanted to keep going for that QB sneak. As Graham, as you said at the start, it's not worked the first time. You've got a power running back there in James Cook. Doesn't work the first time. Turn around and give it to him the second time and try and get it over the line. But possibly just too cute for the coaches up there in Buffalo, and they'll now need to start prepping for their off season and see what they can do to build that team up again and try and bring their confidence back.
We'd talk about Barkley, and as when I watched Barkley on the Eagles, and also when he was on the Giants, he's had so many games where it's 1 yard, 2 yards, 1 yard, 2 yards, and then he breaks off that 60-yard, 70-yard play. Because when you've got the running back on your team, just trust him that he's going to sort of break off. And I can't remember how many times you look and you think, oh, they've got Barkley sussed. He's not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden gets through the gap and he's away down for 60, 70 yards. And the Eagles, again, a team that will just stick to the game plan, trust the players that, they're sort of franchise players to go make the plays. And yeah, maybe that's the difference. You look at the Eagles making the Super Bowl and the Bills, as you say, going home and looking at the off-season now.
No, definitely. It's Derrick Henry's another great example of it. He's a guy that you think you've got him stopped, rips off a big one. Joe Mixon down in Houston as well. He's shown that he can do it for the Bengals, do it for the Texans. Again, I've had Joe Mixon in my fantasy teams, and you're watching these stats coming through, and you're like, oh my God, he's only got 1 yard, he's only got 2 yards, and then all of a sudden, boom, touchdown for a big run. Yeah. So you'll be hoping to see more of that next season, obviously, Graham, and with Mixon, and see him build on the good season he's already had for you guys. So, right, we'll call it a day on that one, guys. As I say, we don't want to step on our Super Bowl previews. Normally, the last couple of years, we've had a full pod on one team and a full pod on the other team. So, again, we'll leave that for the rest of the crew to talk about. Just briefly touch on some of the kind of news items that have came out. So, unfortunately, following the Eagles win, there was a death. An 18-year-old fell off a pole and died as well, which is obviously sad news on that front. On the more positive news, the Pro Bowl games are this weekend as well. We've had the replacements called up, so we've seen the likes of Russell Wilson and Drake May step them up to replace Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Baker Mayfield, which Brian will be ecstatic about, is in the Pro Bowl. He'll now no doubt watch it purely to see Baker. He's replacing Jaden Daniels. And I think who was the other one I'd noticed? It was Jackson Smith and Jigba's replacing Terry McLaurin. That was the other kind of big name on that front as well. Just briefly on the Pro Bowl, guys, he's going to watch any of the games, or he's not really that fussed on it, and just save yourselves?
I'll just watch the highlights. I'll watch the best bits all strung together because, I'm not staying up for that. But I don't mind seeing the clips, and it's good to see players from different teams get together and sort of see. It's quite a relaxed environment, isn't it? So you see some of the personalities of the players.
Nah, definitely. What about you, Graham? You much the same? You catch the highlights, or do you watch it?
I'll probably stick to catching up on seeing what comes up on the social media with this one. Pro Bowl used to be a thing I used to like watching and that, but kind of fell away from it a bit due to tactical voting of the fans. If you've got a big fan base, you can get guys in. Even though they've not had a relatively good season, they can still get in because they're a fan favourite. So if you're one of the lesser supported teams, as I've found the Texans to be over the years, when we've got guys who are really deserving to get in, sometimes they miss out. I'll see what comes up in regards to it.
Yeah, I think on you
go,
Andy.
On you go. Yeah, no, so I was just going to say it's interesting as well because a lot of these players have incentives tied into their contract as well. And like you say about it can just be the fan vote, that could mean the world of difference to some of these players that have these incentives in their contract as well.
No, definitely. And was listening to Pat McAfee earlier, and he was saying that apparently if you're a replacement, that doesn't count towards those incentives, which I didn't realise. It's only if you're named as like in the first list of the Pro Bowls that you can really use that as a bargaining chip, or if you have that incentive in there, which I found interesting. But obviously that all starts kicking off with our skill games tomorrow night, I believe, for ourselves, and then we've got the flag football game on the Sunday. But I think socials are always good to see the big massive highlights from the skills catches and stuff like that, and seeing your Justin Jefferson's doing something outrageous. They're normally pretty good at getting those out there. Other than that, there is some kind of coaching hires. Like Chuck Pagano was the one that kind of jumped out at me coming out of retirement to join the Ravens. I'd mentioned that on our WhatsApp chat as well. So somebody that kind of watches the Pat McAfee shows, Chuck Pagano always seems pretty good banter. So it'll be an interesting voice to add to that Ravens secondary as well. But guys, we will call it a night there. I won't take up any more of your time. I think this is probably the first time I have been under the hour, so Keith will be absolutely delighted on that fact. And all I can say, guys, is thank you very much for joining me. So, Graham, listen, again, I think the last 2 times we've been on, you have jumped on at short notice to help dig me out a hole. So, thanks very much, man.
It's all right. The spade's always on the emergency shelf just in case.
Good man. And Andy, obviously, you out of the 3, you were the only one that was planned to be on tonight. So you've been working patiently around us guys, trying to kind of find a time that suits everybody. So thanks very much for coming on, Andy.
No bother at all. It's always a pleasure to be on. I'm just glad I'm back on. It's been a while. So yeah, no, thank you very much for your time, boys.
Nah, good stuff, man. Good stuff. We will have some more pods coming up. I don't know if there's another one planned for this week with it just being the Pro Bowl, but there will definitely be some pods coming out next week around focusing. I'd imagine we'll be focusing on the Eagles on one of them, and we'll focus on the Chiefs in the other one, as we have in the past kind of couple of seasons as well. So looking forward to that. And all I can say to everyone, thanks for sticking with us. Apologies for not getting us on Instagram. That was a picnic problem in chair, not on computer. So thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in on YouTube and X. And give us a like, follow, subscribe. The pod will be up later on all the usual platforms, which I will leave to Keith on that one. And we will catch you all next week.